You may begin.
Madam Speaker, me get up this afternoon to make my first sectoral speech for my portfolio.
Hold on. Standing orders. And I think you are fully aware. And if I have to stop you again during your presentation, you will not get any additional time. No, and she knows.
Broken English.
Standing order 6, page 3.
When I speak to this,
Representation and culture. It's not Spanish. That's Spanish.
Madam Speaker, Leroy, allow me to speak. A leader. Madam Speaker, perhaps I should abandon that attempt to use our local language because I have been reminded of the linguistic conventions of this honorable House. Because maybe there is no more fitting way to begin a presentation on culture than to speak briefly in the language understood by the overwhelming majority of Jamaican people. Even if that language still struggles for full acceptance in some of our most formal national spaces, including this very parliament. So let me give you the Queen's English. Let me give you the Queen's English. At the outset, permit me first to thank the Leader of the Opposition, the Most Honourable Mark Golding, for the confidence he has placed in me through this portfolio assignment. I also thank my parliamentary colleagues, my councillors, my constituency and personal team, and the many people who support the demanding work of representation and public service every single day. Public life is never carried by one person alone. And I especially want to thank my parents, Miss Fair and Pastor Burchell, for instilling in me from very early a deep love for Jamaica, a deep respect for people, right, Leroy? And a deep pride in our culture, particularly through faith, religion, community, and service. Much of what I understand today about identity, resilience, storytelling, and the spirit of Jamaican people began long before politics. It began in church. It began in my community. It began in school. It began in my yard. And permit me especially to acknowledge the people of South St. James who traveled all the way from country to town to sit in this chamber today to hear their MP deliver her maiden sectoral presentation. From Anchovy to Catadupa, from Maroon Town to Welcome Hall, from Springfield to Mount Carey. Thank you for making the journey. Thank you for believing in me. The people of South St. James are not merely observers of Jamaican culture. We are carriers of it. We're protectors of it, builders of it. And I want them to know that every single day I walk in this house, I never forget what it means to represent you. I never forget where I come from. And I will fight every single day for the people of South St. James and for the dignity, the potential and future of rural Jamaica. I'm a country girl. Before I proceed into the substance of this presentation, permit me briefly to make an observation about the structure of our sectoral debates themselves. It would perhaps be far more useful to the country if the sequencing of these presentations allowed the Jamaicans first to hear from the sitting portfolio minister outlining the government's priorities, their achievements and proposed direction, and then shortly thereafter hear from the opposition spokesperson engaging those ideas directly, identifying the gaps, strengthening proposals where necessary, and advancing alternative visions where appropriate. That's developmental. Because the purpose of these debates should not merely be performance, political theater, or ritual. They should also function as developmental dialogue. And so in this instance, I speak before the country has yet heard from Minister Olivia Antibabzi-Grange herself. But permit me nonetheless to acknowledge her long-standing commitment to this ministry and the energy she has invested over many years in Jamaica's cultural and entertainment sectors. Big up yourself, Auntie Babsy. But in the absence of that sequencing structure, I will use this opportunity not merely to critique, but to place on the table a broader national vision. Because culture, creativity, entertainment, and information cannot continue to exist at the margins of national development policy. They're not ornamental. They're not side conversations. They're not ceremonial add-ons. They are infrastructure, economic infrastructure, tourism infrastructure, employment, identity, digital infrastructure, soft power infrastructure, democratic infrastructure. And perhaps no country on earth proves that more clearly than Jamaica. Long before many countries knew our GDP, they knew our music. Before they knew our exports, they knew our athletes. Before they knew our population size, they knew our sound, our language, our creativity, our spirit. Jamaica is a cultural superpower with a developing economy. That reality demands that we begin treating culture, creativity, and information not as peripheral concerns of government, but as strategic pillars of economic development and global influence. I'm going to speak to culture. Culture as infrastructure. For some people, culture is an event. For people like me, culture is how we survive. I come to this portfolio not only as a parliamentarian, but as a daughter of rural Jamaica, a daughter of South St. James, raised in communities where culture was not something carefully packaged and occasionally consumed, but something we lived every single day. We heard it in the churches, how we clap, how we dance, how we sing. We heard it in our music. We heard it in the marketplaces. We heard it in the sound systems drifting across districts at evening time. In the cadence of our elders' storytelling, in our revival meetings, in our zinc fence conversations, in the humor and resilience of ordinary Jamaican people. Before I ever studied communication academically at the London School of Economics, I experienced communication culturally. Before I ever understood branding professionally, I understood identity instinctively. And perhaps that is why I approach this portfolio with a deep conviction that culture is far more than your entertainment. Culture shapes how our people see themselves. Culture determines whether a nation walks with confidence or with insecurity. Culture influences how the world sees us and how we see ourselves. Culture carries memory. It carries resistance, it carries aspiration, and it carries opportunity. Yet too often in Jamaica, culture is still treated as an ornamental, as though it is merely something to entertain us after the serious business of nation building is complete. But culture is not separate from development. It builds economies. It builds economies. It builds tourism, builds social cohesion, it builds confidence. It builds diplomacy and global influence. And just like roads, schools, ports, and digital systems, culture requires investment. It requires maintenance, systems, and vision. A country that neglects the cultural infrastructure eventually weakens its national confidence. culture globally while underinvesting in the people who create it leaves enormous economic and human potential unrealized. Too often in Jamaica, culture remains concentrated in Kingston, within isolated institutions or within occasional annual events, Grand Gala. But culture must live where the people live. And the economic benefits of culture must reach the communities that created it in the first place. That means the rural communities, the inner city communities, the artisans, the musicians, the storytellers, the craft vendors, the food vendors, young digital creators, small business operators, ordinary, everyday Jamaicans whose lives, experiences shape the Jamaican identity the world now consumes. Because Jamaica's culture was not manufactured in a book. It was born in communities, in districts, in churches, in the dancehall spaces. And if culture is truly to become infrastructure, then we must democratize culture. Ownership and economic participation must be open. What do I mean? The people who create Jamaican culture must also meaningfully benefit from its economic value. At present, too much of our cultural economy remains informal, fragmented, undercapitalized, and understructured. Too many creatives still struggle with financing, licensing, distribution, intellectual property protection, institutional support, and long-term sustainability. Too often we speak about culture emotionally while failing to structure it economically. But culture is not merely performance. It's not an item on the program. Culture is value chains. A properly developed cultural product activates entire ecosystems. The seamstress benefit, the farmer benefit, the chef benefit, the transportation provider benefit, the videographer, the tour guide, the makeup artist, entire communities benefit. And perhaps one of the clearest examples of untapped cultural potential sits deep in the hills of South St. James, the story of our national hero, Sam Sharp. Too often we reduce Sharp to portrait on a mural wall somewhere, a face on a currency note, or a once-a-year ceremony attended by a sprinkling of people in Catadupa Square. But Sam Sharp was visionary, intellectual, spiritually grounded, charismatic, revolutionary. And what he ignited through the Christmas War, we don't call it rebellion, helped to accelerate the collapse of slavery across the entire British Empire. He's a powerful man. So it's not merely Jamaican history that he influenced world history. The audacity of that young Baptist preacher from deep bush, South St. James, lit flames of freedom for far beyond Jamaica's shores. So the question becomes, how do we move from memorializing our heroes to mobilizing their stories as living cultural infrastructure? Imagine immersive heritage journeys beginning in Croydon, where he was born, moving through Lapland, Budtrack, Moko, Kensington, tracking their way down into Montego Bay, where he lit flames of freedom. Imagine sections of the old railway system reimagined into experiential heritage journeys, retracing the pathways that Sam Sharp and his freedom fighters moved during the Christmas War. Imagine through history itself, actors, storytellers, drummers, food vendors, costume designers, tour guides, historians, entire communities participating in a living cultural economy rooted in Jamaica's history. Not abstract history, living history. That, Madam Speaker, is how rural economies remain alive. That is how tourism moves beyond resort walls. That is how educational tourism develops. That is how communities participate directly in the monetization of their own heritage and identity. Because Jamaica must move beyond